But let it be said that though we are turning over the highest leadership of the party to the next generation, our present generation, and even the generation before me in our 17-year-old party have much to contribute. The shoulders, the backbone will be the party stalwarts who have been there with us all these years.
That was President Arroyo telling the party faithful at the recent PICC Lakas-Kampi CMD convention what she told the country at her last State of the Nation address. Don't count her out because she's neither down nor out in 2010 or beyond. Last October, Mrs. Arroyo became the second longest-serving president in our history, and yet she faces a problem identical to those Marcos, who still hold the record, and Quezon, whom she overtook 2 months ago, faced. Can she and the coalition she's hammered together maintain its relevance as the country braces to elect her successor? Tonight, our next to the last episode on the parties that created presidents, we're going to look at Lakas-Kampi CMD and the machinery of its standard bearer. I'm Manolo Quezon, the explainer. Whether it's Raul Gonzalez, Prospero Nograles, or Salde Ampatuan, the leading lights of the Lakas-Kampi that gathered at the PICC to formalize the nomination of Gibo Teodoro Jr. are first and foremost provincial kingpins whose unity has been forged over the 9 years and counting of the present dispensation. The President formally handed over party leadership and beamed as her party's anointed tandem made their debut. She could well afford to bask in the reflected warmth of a coalition she's nurtured for 9 years, longer and with a wider reach than 10 out of the 12 elected administrations this country's had. There's something about Asian politics that's conducive to super parties like Lakas-Kampi, and it may have something to do with the dynamics of the generally peaceful independence campaigns of countries like ours and India. In India, for example, the Party of Independence, the Congress Party, held on to power for generations. Another example is UNMO in Malaysia, which serves as an inspiration for virtual one-party dominance going on 2 generations now by a cozy and unbeatable parliamentary majority. From 1907 to 1935, the Nacionalista Party never lost a majority in the legislature, and during Quezon's Commonwealth starting in 1935, he established one-party rule to the extent that by 1938, the Nacionalista Party had 100% of the seats in the National Assembly and unbeatable dominance in virtually every province. If it hadn't been for World War II, the Philippines would probably have gone the way of India, where the Congress Party ruled 50 years, and Malaysia, where UMNO has ruled for as long a time. But the division in Philippine society caused by the war shattered the NP and gave us a 2-party system. 2 presidents had the chance after that to restore the one-party system by creating an administration super party. But the first of our post-war presidents, Manuel Rojas, died before he could seek re-election and achieve it. Ramon Magsaysay was so phenomenally popular that both the NP and LP wanted to have him as their common candidate when he sought re-election, and he himself was planning to create a new super party to replace both. But his death in 1957 derailed that possibility. Ferdinand Marcos finally managed to create a super party but had to establish a dictatorship to do it. His KBL would be the only party that mattered from 1978 to 1986, or about as long as the Commonwealth's pre-war NP supermajority. But when he was evicted from office, his super party melted away into irrelevance. President Arroyo, for her part, has had a long and at times arduous climb to creating her own supermajority party, saddled on one hand by her affiliation with the Lakas-CMD, with its elder statesmen, former President Ramos and Speaker Jose de Venecia, and her own pet party, Kampi, created as a temporary vehicle for her vice presidential bid in 1998. The coronation of her coalition's anointed tandem last November was only made possible because of the President's hammering out the merger of Lakas and Kampi and the creation, in turn, of Lakas-Kampi CMD, something that ought to have been accomplished much sooner. Among the problems hounding the administration coalition was the question of who would be appropriate as the president's anointed successor. The vice president was the obvious choice, but he hemmed, hawed, and blinked his way to irrelevance. At the same time, other administration allies like Bayani Fernando, who bragged about being a Lakas original, insisted he be given consideration, and the party had to go through the motions of putting him on par with the president's obvious choice, Defense Secretary Gibo Teodoro Jr. But the political clock was ticking, and in the end, the president's allies from Lakas-Kampi ganged up to push the process forward, declaring themselves solidly behind Teodoro. And the leadership found itself stampeded by its provincial kingpins on one hand and receiving word from the president on the other, leaving the elders little room for maneuver. For example, Prospero Pichay, when I interviewed him on Ricky Carandang's show, had to shrug helplessly when I asked him if anyone doubted the result of the party directorate's meeting. The president had spoken, he said, and true enough, Teodoro was it. This left the problem of a running mate, and party morale began to sag as it seemed even those who initially wanted the nomination, like Interior Secretary Ronaldo Puno, dropped out having seen the writing on the wall politically. Puno's brother is supposed to have privately said his brother's no Don Quixote, and that if the surveys showed dim chances, he'd bow out, which he did. What followed was a series of ill-fated flirtations as Teodoro was set up with promising running mates like the widely admired Gwen Garcia of Cebu, but like Vilma Santos, Garcia eventually didn't nibble at the vice presidential bait. In the end, matinee idol Edu Manzano was chosen as the VP candidate in a move widely understood to mean he'd serve as Teodoro's interpreter and barker to the masses. But we have to step back at this point to take a look at the party that selected both men. It begins with the man on the rightmost in this picture. He's Raul Manglapos, eloquent, honest, principled, and quixotic, who was fed up with the post-war two-party system and wanted a more ideologically grounded centrist party to replace them. He would eventually latch on to Christian democracy as the template of precisely the kind of party he wanted. Reformist but not radical, Christian in ethics but secular in practice, and with a wide network of similar parties, particularly in Europe, with which to ally. Manglapos' National Union of Christian Democrats, or NUCD, would have been a fringe party were it not for this man, Speaker Ramon Mitra Jr., who led the super party, the Labanan Demokratikong Pilipino, or LDP, during the Cory years, and who hoped to lead it as he pursued his own presidential bid in 1992. Now, a military man bitten by the political bug, AFP Chief of Staff turned Secretary of National Defense Fidel V. Ramos, decided to contest the LDP nomination, but lost. He bolted the LDP, and Manglapos, with an established, though small party, joined forces with FVR's political vehicle, Lakas Tao, and so was Lakas NUCD, later Lakas CMD, born. Now, enjoying Cory Aquino's blessings, FVR won the presidency in a real squeaker of an election, but then turned his minority into a growing majority. Jose de Venecia became the Mitra of the Ramos years, cobbling together a rainbow coalition, while the 1995 midterms gave Ramos control of the Senate too. But in 1998, his efforts to amend the Constitution to extend his stay in office having failed, Ramos had to pay the piper, and his loyal speaker became the Lakas candidate for the presidency. His running mate, in turn, became Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, who'd originally created Campi as a potential vehicle for the presidency, but she decided, in the face of Joseph Estrada's popularity, to go for number 2, a winning strategy. Lakas CMD withered away during the Estrada years, but his shortened presidency meant it could come roaring back when GMA became president. But hers was a titular leadership so long as she was dependent on De Venecia as speaker, and Ramos continued to enjoy prominence and prestige at home and abroad. As Pio Ontiveros likes to say, it's nothing personal, it's strictly politics, and the political dynamics of presidential power asserted themselves in time. While JDV and FVR helped save the president in 2005, her lease on life gave her the motivation and the will to take both men down. JDV would be discarded as speaker by 2008. FVR, after saving the president, was subjected to a humiliating exhibition of impotence even earlier in 2006, when it was time to pay the price for his saving her the previous year. The president didn't honor the bill, and in a party showdown proved she had the numbers and would do charter chain FVR's